Hello and welcome to tutorial number 2 of our Beginner Max MSP series. So in this tutorial we're going to go over other tutorials, ironically. Patcher, what a patcher is, object, object explorer, inlet, outlet, patch cord, edit mode, and performance mode. So to start, some other reference materials. If you're serious about learning Max MSP, there are a lot of online resources that you can refer to. This is actually a book. These are 2 books. Electronic Music and Sound Design, Theory and Practice. That's for the next video. So, Electronic Music and Sound Design, Volumes 1 and Volume 2 are, they talk about electronic music theory, so sound synthesis and processing, frequency, amplitude, waveform. So they go very in-depth of how to build synthesizers from scratch, kind of a thing. And after they talk about it theoretically, they show how to do it using Max MSP. So you learn, not only do you learn music and sound theory very in-depthly, but you also learn how to create things using that theory in Max MSP. You get to see it in practice. So it's a must-have if you're serious about learning Max MSP, especially on the music side. Another option is you have Intro to Max MSP, a series by Amanda Gassai, who she lays out her own way of teaching Max MSP from the ground up, and she covers the it's my phone. She covers the MSP side of things, really. But one thing that is really awesome, even if you don't want to check out her tutorials, is if you look through her projects, she has tons. She has gathered tons of projects created by other people who use Max MSP in some way, like this dude, using a Connect and Ableton and Max. That's so cool. So I would definitely recommend looking up her stuff. Another resource you have at your disposal is just YouTube tutorials. If you just type into YouTube Max MSP tutorials, you have tons of things come up. Cycling 74 does a lot of tutorials. This Baz tutorial guy does it. Delicious Max MSP, dude 837, aka your good buddy Sam, makes some advanced Max MSP tutorials. I can't recommend these ones enough, because even as long as you know how to build an object and connect outlets to inlets, you can make patches that are way over your head just because he walks you through step by step how to build the patches. So I really would recommend Delicious Max MSP tutorials. There's also Joel Rich and a bunch of other guys. And the final reference material I will talk about is if you go to Max, you go to the help area here, we have Max tutorials, MSP tutorials, and Jitter tutorials, which in the last video we covered the difference between the 3. So you go to these and it has documentation. So it's written out. So for example, this basic tutorial 1, hello, it's all writing, and it also comes with an example patcher for you to follow along with. So it actually talks about the patcher, and you get to interact with the patcher while you read with it. So if you want to learn Max MSP aside from this video series, totally recommend those options. But anyways, let's get into it. So first, what's a patcher? Patcher, new patcher up here, is your blank document. Well, it doesn't have to be blank, but it is your document. It's essentially like what a document is in Microsoft Word. It's also called a Max patch. You'll hear it referred to as a patch and patches. I guess patches is probably slang. They're probably technically called patchers. But and when you create a file using this, you actually save it as a .maxpat file. So maxpat. So it's a patcher. Why are they called this? We'll get to that. What's an object? According to the basic hello tutorial, which I just pulled up, they contain functions that perform some sort of task and operate like miniature programs within a larger environment. Basically a mini program that, when triggered, manipulates and or creates data in a specific way. What it is essentially is it's a thing that does a thing, honestly, is one way of putting it. So you have a button and a toggle. When you press a button, it sends a bang, and when you press a toggle, it sends out a 1 or a 0. So they have very specific tasks of what they do. So those are objects. And how do I create an object? Well, I just created two right there using some shortcuts. But one way to create an object, the most common way, is you hover your mouse cursor over a desired area, and then you press the N key. And look at that, you have an object box. So this is from Electronic Music and Sound Design, that book I pulled up. It says, the object that appears is a generic object called the object box. See, it looks like a little box. It is the object that we will use most often when patching. Its function depends upon the name that we give it when we type a string into its interior. And for those who don't know, the word string is computer programming lingo that refers to a combination of letters and numbers, such as print, save, a string containing number 1, or subsection 22. So a string is just any combination of symbols, essentially, and notice that there are no spaces in the strings. So we have this object box, and now we need to, you essentially can type object names into it. So if we want a random object, we type random, and then all of a sudden it creates the random object. So that's how you can create any object. Let's say we want an adder UI, and then you get that, and you got a function, and you get that. So you type it into the object box, and sometimes it stays as an object box, and sometimes it turns into a user interface object. So another way to create view objects, Object Explorer. So Object Explorer is so important that you have 5 different ways of accessing it. Kind of, yeah, let's just say that really shows how important it is. So one way to do it is to first double click on any blank part of your patcher window. Look at that, Object Explorer. This is the Object Explorer. Let's make it a little bigger there. It has all of the objects that you have at your disposal. So notice that there are different categories that you that it organizes the objects in. All of these are objects. So there are a lot of objects in Max MSP. I currently have 109 or 1009, but maybe that might be because I've downloaded some external ones as well. So you see that they are organized in many different fashions. So you could just use the ones that are user interface. So see, they don't look like that object box. They don't look like this. They have an actual interface to it, the UI objects. Then you have just Max objects, just MSP objects, just Jitter objects. So what's another way to access the Object Explorer? Hover mouse over desired area and press the lowercase p. Opens it. Another object or way is to show Object Explorer down here. There you go. Another way is right click, show Object Explorer right there. And a fifth way is to open the sidebar like this. And then you see that we have the Object Explorer built into the side of our window now. So that's a fifth way to access the Object Explorer. Let's close that though. Cool, cool. Moving on. Inlets, outlets, and patch cords. Inlets, outlets, say what they do. How nice. So let's get the random object up again. You have inlets. All inlets are always on top. All outlets are always on bottom. So let's do another metro. Again, inlets are on the top. Outlets are on the bottom. So these particular two have 2 inlets and 1 outlet. But that's not always the case. So for example, this function object has 1 inlet and 4 outputs or outlets. So notice how something very important and useful, that when you hover over an inlet or an outlet, it tells you what it's doing. So if you send a bang to this inlet, it outputs all. If you send a float, and it outputs y at x, and so on. So it says what it does. Same with the outlets. They say what they do, what gets sent out of their outlets and y. So this one outputs a random number. This one outputs ticks of metronome. And patch cords. So this isn't here. Let's I'm going to make a button. So if we click and drag from the outlet to an inlet, there we go. Now we've created a patch cord. We have a patch cord connecting the outlet of an object to the inlet of another object. And notice how we could bring it around everywhere, and we don't have to keep it. It'll automatically adjust itself. And also notice that, so if you click and hold and then hold shift, actually if you shift and click, then I'm not holding the mouse anymore. If you shift click it, it automatically keeps it. So now I'm gonna hold shift, and then look at that. So you can connect one outlet to as many different inlets simultaneously as you want. That's how MaxMSP works. So we can make this one button do things to 3 different objects, not at the same time, but kind of at the same time. And we'll talk about that with order of execution when we get there. So you can connect outlets to as many inlets as possible. You can connect inlets to as many outlets as possible. Let's see if, so like if you really wanted, this doesn't do anything as a patch, but just as an example, you can connect multiple things to the same outlets and inlets. And then you get these really crazy looking shapes, So these are patch cords. One trick too is that if you click and drag, you can select everything. But notice how you can select all the objects. Notice how it doesn't select the patch cords though. So see, when you select a patch cord, it turns all blue like this. So how do we select the patch cords? On an Apple, I'm not sure what it is on Windows, but you could probably look it up online. You could look it up online. If you hold the Option key and then click and drag, look at that. We can select the different patch cords, and so then we could decide to delete them, things like that. One last thing I'll mention about patch cords is, so you can connect it. Notice how when it's selected, you have this green part and this red part. Let's say that you're like, well, I want to change the connection from metro to random. If you click and hold on the red part, look at that. You could just use the same patch cord, move it around. Just like that. So that's useful. Cool. Moving on. So what's the deal with patch cords, patches, patchers, etc.? Well, the answer is, let's find it, patch panels or patch bays. If you have ever been in a recording studio, patch bays are common in recording studios still. What a patch bay is it's essentially a way to connect different hardware, different circuits. So you see, it's just kind of a bunch of holes. It's slowly working. Well, here, let me show you this. When I think of patch bays, this is what I think of. The old school telephone operating systems. See how they're connecting circuits by using these cables. So this is essentially what you're doing when you're doing MaxMSP. You're unplugging it and then plugging it into a different circuit, connecting circuits like this. And I have another example here. Why use a patch bay? So this is a patch bay in a recording studio.
If we didn't have the patch bay, I would have to crawl around and run XLR cables anytime I wanted to change the configuration. But with the patch bay, I could go, say, from Pro Tools output 12 to
outlet,
a compressor
to an inlet,
and back to
from the outlet,
the line input of the channel,
back to an inlet.
Very conveniently.
So that's so these are the 2 videos I used too, if you want to check them out. So that's why they call them patches or patchers and using patch cords. That's what we're doing. We're connecting outlets to inlets, just like we've always been doing using cables, but instead of cables, we are using just a virtual program. So it's really cool. Let's do something already. Okay, so create 2 sliders. One by typing in the object box and one by the object explorer. So let's try this. So if I press N, then I type in slider. So notice how you can autocomplete the object name. So if you just write slid and then you press the down arrow, you move down the different objects that have that in its name or in its description. So go to slider and then press enter. Beautiful, we've made this UI object. Now let's get a slider by using the Object Explorer. So I'm gonna press the lowercase p, and then the slider is, believe it or not, in the sliders category. It's very strange they would put it in there. So I believe you can drag and drop it, and you could also double click it, and then it will appear. So connect the outlet of one slider, so this outlet, so I'm going to click and hold, to the inlet of another slider. Notice how, as long as it's got that circle around it, bam, we can let go. So you have like some margin of error, you can, whoa, just right there, and it'll automatically connect to it. You can select patch cords by holding down Option and click drag. You can also change patch cords. I already went over that. Now, let's try and move this first slider up and down. Let's try and get some values out of it. Oh no, we're just moving the object. That's not what we want to do. How do we actually use the slider as a switch to move it up and down? Well, there's one last thing that's very important with Max MSP. It is edit mode and performance mode. So right now, we are in edit mode. What does edit mode mean? It means we are creating. We are in the process of making objects and connecting them to each other and actually building our patch. So we need to turn into performance mode. So there's a few ways to do that. When it is in edit mode, you'll notice that this lock down here is unlocked. And then performance mode is when we actually get to interact with our patch. So how to switch between edit and performance modes? There's 4 different ways. One of the ways that I probably do the most often is if you hold command. This is again on a Mac. I'm not sure what it is on a Windows, but if you hold command and then click on a blank spot, any blank spot in the patcher. Look at that. You'll notice that now it's locked down here. And so you notice how there's all these little dots for the grid. But if you put it into performance mode, they disappear. Now, when I click on this slider, look at that. I get to actually have fun with the slider, and it's not moving the object around on the screen. So that's one way to go from edit mode to performance mode, is to hold command and click on the blank area of the patch. A second way is to hold command and press E. So beautiful. Third way is to click the lock on the bottom left, just like that. And then a fourth way is to go to view and press this edit. But as you can see, that's actually what we do as well when we press Command E. So, cool. So, that's the end of this tutorial, but one last thing I'm going to leave you with is, look at that. How come when I move this one, it's not changing the value of this one, but when I move this one, it does? Pretty obvious answer, which is that there's no outlet. The outlet is not hooked up to this inlet. So, however, if we do this, oh no, Stack Overflow, what does that mean? Well, we'll cover that in a different episode. No, how about this? Okay, so it is giving it a feedback loop. So you think about it, you're sending a value out of this slider, and then it's going into this one. But then you're also sending the value out of this slider, and then it's going into this one. But then you're also sending the value out of this one, and it's going back. And so luckily Max is such a cool program that it automatically disables the outlets until this message is cleared. It automatically disables the outlets instead of just crashing your computer or Max MSP, so that if you accidentally create a feedback loop like that, it doesn't just completely ruin your patch, which you haven't saved, which is very important to do. So that's another really cool thing about Max. Anyways, that's it for this tutorial. I will see you in the next one.